My name is Nairi and this channel is for adopters and foster carers and those dealing with children that have got childhood trauma. Today we're going to look at the very popular book by Sarah Nash, which is A to Z of Therapeutic Parenting. I've shared the survival tips for therapeutic parents already on my channel. I'll link that at the end for you. If you've not found me before, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's get started. So here it is. I expect if you are on the adoption or fostering journey, you probably have seen this book. It's a very, very popular book. But what I've done is I've done a deep dive into it, and I'm going to tell you how the book works, how it's divided up, and what are the positives, what are some of the drawbacks, and then you can decide if you want to go and buy it for yourself. So, okay, first of all, it's a fun cover. And I think Sarah Nash is a fun writer. I think she has a lot of sense of humour, she has a lot of realism in her books, and that's what sometimes sets her apart from other information about adoption and fostering. It's real. Okay, so what she's done is she has actually divided the book into two separate parts, and the first is the basics. So she goes through the basics. Chapter 1 is, why do our children do the things they do? So what I would say to you is, if you haven't actually fostered or adopted yet, by all means buy the book, but a lot of it is not going to make sense to you until you have a child in the home. So there's no harm in reading it, but I'd say proceed with caution, because there's so much information in here that some of it may become a little bit confusing if you don't actually have a child in the home with childhood trauma. But lots of times it is put on a recommended reading list, so as I say, it's fine if you want to. So let me read this to you and then you can see how she writes. Anger. We often see anger as a constant visible emotion in our children. Anger can be a defensive mechanism to avoid showing sadness. In order to be sad, our children need to display their vulnerability, and this is something they don't feel safe enough to do. So they use their anger like a protective shell. The shell is made up of rudeness, defiance, and hostility, which seems to ooze from the child. So that's just a little kind of like brief thing. You can see that she uses language really, really well in a very tactile way to draw the reader in. It goes through why children do the things they do, a word about developmental trauma and related disorders. So that describes to you how developmental trauma can cover so much and other conditions kind of link into it, but there can be a lot of confusion around it. So it's a really useful chapter. The essential foundations of therapeutic parenting, and in that I believe she covers why boundaries are so essential, and I actually think I might do a video on that, and why are boundaries so essential in therapeutic parenting. Why is it that therapeutic parents think they have to be nice to children all the time and let them get away with a lot of things, and that's what therapeutic parenting is? Because it's not. The boundaries are an essential part of it, and yes, I think I will do a video on that. The PACE parenting model, of which I do also have videos on my channel, she does a different model which she acronyms PARENTS, P-A-R-E-N-T-S, and goes through how you may relate to a situation and an incident and what you might do about it. So I think it's quite a useful acronym. It is quite long to remember, whereas PACE, you can remember it really well. This is a bit more involved, but it's also very useful, I would say. So that's just an example of some of the chapters in part 1, the basics. Then she gets into the A to Z of behaviours and challenges with solutions. Now this is the massive plus of this book. It's not just describing to you what the behaviours and challenges are. No, it's giving you some strategies, it's giving you some reflections, it's giving you some realities in there, so that if you find yourself in a really difficult situation, you're actually able to use it as a practical book. Now the disadvantage of that is each section is quite meaty, so even one of the A to Z sections, which I'm going to read to you in a minute, is quite involved and it's a lot of information. So it's definitely a dip in, dip out of book. The issue with an A to Z is you don't always know where what you're looking for is going to appear. So say for example you have an angry child, but you're not thinking it's the word angry to look under. Maybe you're thinking of the word confrontation, and confrontation isn't there, it's under anger. You've got to work out where it is in the book. I picked one that's quite specific. Okay, so I did look at friendships, but I thought that's quite wide, so I've looked at brushing teeth. Okay, so some children hate brushing their teeth, and she goes through, in each section she has a heading, so she breaks it down into the different sections there. what it looks like, why it might happen, preventative strategies. I think that's really useful. Like, we don't just always want to react in a moment. Sometimes we want to have something we can do ahead of time. And strategies during, so when it's happening, what can you do? And then after that, strategies after. Now, nearly every little point in the book has all those sections in it, even in the A to Z bit. So that's why I'm saying it's very in depth. So I'm not going to read you all of it, but I'm just going to pick a little bit off for the brushing of the teeth. So what does it look like? The child refuses to brush their teeth. The child says they have brushed their teeth when they have not. That's what happens in our family all the time. The child does not brush their teeth properly. That's also what happens in our family. It's very frustrating. And why it might happen. So I'll read that to you, and then what I will do is just give you a couple of examples of strategies during that happening. So it might happen because of sensory issues. Now, I'm not reading all of our sentences here. Inability to manage transitions, need of control, lack of cause and effects. I'm not thinking about, if I don't brush my teeth, I'm going to get tooth cavities. Recreating a familiar environment. The habit of brushing teeth may not be part of the child's daily routine. They haven't got it in here yet that it's part of their daily routine. That's just a few examples. Strategies during: use novelty toothbrushes, toothpaste and timers can be very effective. This might be giving the toothbrush a name, writing notes for the toothbrush. Colgate does 2-minute stories, which can be useful during the time it takes for the child to brush their teeth. That's just one of the strategies, and there's several in there. So I want to read you a part of chapter 7, which is in the first part of the book. So managing your own feelings, compassion, fatigue and self-care. So I want to read to you blame and compassion fatigue, which is in section 1, and that's because this is one of the reasons why I ever started the channel in the first place, is to make sure that you as a foster carer or an adopter does not feel isolated, and it's mirrored in this book here. This research demonstrated that it's common for carers to have feelings of isolation and become detached emotionally just to get through each day, leading to an inability to manage more than one child's most basic needs. Foster carers also reported they felt many social workers had little or no understanding of the reality of the challenges faced on a day-to-day basis, and that blaming and judgmental stances adopted by supporting professionals are further isolating to the parent. So that's from a foster carer's point of view, how it's difficult to discuss with social workers what's actually happening in your family with a child. And I would say for adopters, the difficulty for us, even though I've been a foster carer, is that actually trying to explain this to family and friends becomes a difficulty once the social worker kind of visits are out of the way. So it's a similar feeling. So she goes on to say that she's been a social worker and she knows the training is limited, and I suppose what's really difficult for us is who we share with when it comes to dealing with children with childhood trauma, what we're going through. And so I hope this channel will be one of the ways that you can connect, not just with me, but with other adopters and foster carers, to know that we're all going through some similar things. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed that little brief overview of Sarah Nash. I'm sure that it will be much more interesting for you if you actually get the book, and if you found it useful, please give me a thumbs up, and I'll link some interesting videos at the end for you, especially her other book that you can see. Thank you for watching Fly Little Birds.